The tarmac at Fort Bragg stretched like a sun-baked stage under a bruised dawn. She stepped off the bus carrying a duffel bag that had seen more airports than she had, boots stiff, uniform pressed but unfamiliar, and a face too young for what she carried inside. Around her, seasoned soldiers hustled past, dragging gear, barking orders, their voices snapping like whips in the morning air. To them, she was just another replacement, fresh training. Another hopeful who hadn't yet learned how war carved men and women into someone unrecognizable. She didn't correct them, let them think she was green, let them underestimate the quiet steel behind her hazel eyes. Inside her jacket, carefully wrapped in oilcloth and tucked against her chest, were 5 purple hearts. 5 times the U.S. military had pinned them on her, 5 battles where her body and soul had paid in blood and pain. Each one weighed heavier than any duffel bag she'd carried, heavier than the pack slung over her shoulder. 5 badges of survival nobody would suspect. A helicopter lifted off in the distance, rotors whirling like some mechanical predator, dust biting at her skin and eyes. She breathed steady. Her hands flexed at her sides, fingers brushing the smooth leather of her jacket without hesitation. Each breath a reminder she had been here before. She knew what to expect. The chaos, the fear, the sudden silence just before the storm, and she would survive again like she always had. Sergeants moved past, sizing her up, exchanging glances. Fresh training, one muttered under his breath, the corners of his mouth twitching. They smirked. She smiled faintly, the gesture careful, nothing revealing. Inside, she counted the tiny victories she'd survived before anyone ever heard her name. She had been called reckless, resilient, brave, stubborn. Every label carried scars. Every scar was a story that couldn't be shared with strangers who might only see a polished uniform and a stiff posture. She was called forward for muster. Orders barked, names echoed, a roll call rolling over her ears like distant thunder. The list of names, locations, ranks, movements, all meaningless until necessity demanded action. She stepped forward, head high, boots tapping in rhythm with her heartbeat, each step deliberate. Eyes flicked up to meet the sergeant's, a challenge unspoken. Notice me now or regret it later. The air thickened with expectation. The sun climbed, baking the tarmac, dust swirling around her legs. The sergeant handed her papers, movements sharp and precise. Flight assignments, briefing times, gear manifest. She accepted them without question. The others glanced again, questioning, intrigued. They didn't know she had walked through fire, crawled under metal, felt shrapnel tear through her, and still reported for duty like this was just another day. 5 purple hearts weren't just medals, they were warnings. Stories written in pain and survival that no one dared verify without risking their own disbelief. Nearby, a helicopter rumbled to life, engines screaming against the morning calm. She stepped toward it, duffel bag swinging loosely, fingers grazing the oilcloth beneath her jacket. Each rotation of the blades reminded her of spinning back through memories she had tried to bury. Kandahar dust storms, concrete and blood, night missions where sound and light betrayed every movement, and the faces she could never forget. A hand clamped on her shoulder, jolting her attention back. Lieutenant Green, a voice hesitant as if daring to disturb a sleeping legend. She turned, meeting eyes that had only seen rookies. Yes, she answered calmly. No tremor in her voice, just a smooth tone that carried authority she didn't flaunt, power she didn't need to announce. The man nodded, uncertain. They were supposed to be equals, but the weight behind her quiet presence unsettled him. Her past lingered like a shadow he couldn't name. They began moving toward the choppers. She walked between soldiers unnoticed at first until a medic's eyes flicked down and froze. A faint, almost imperceptible glimmer of purple beneath her jacket drew his gaze. Not a ribbon, not a pin, just the edge of something that screamed experience, pain, valor. He swallowed hard, glanced away. She kept her face neutral, ears alert, feet steady. Words could wait. Actions would speak first. The wind picked up as the helicopter rotors roared closer, lifting dust and debris into the air. She adjusted the strap of her duffel bag, scanning the horizon. Nothing would surprise her, not anymore. She had survived ambushes that left her screaming in darkness, firefights that chewed through her squad, and nights when silence was louder than bullets. She was alive because she learned how to move through chaos without flinching. She didn't need them to believe her. She only needed them alive. Orders came down from above, boarding immediately. Soldiers hustled, shoving gear, voices barking coordinates. She followed without hesitation, slipping into a seat near the rear. The interior smelled of oil, sweat, and gunmetal. The seatbelt clicked. Her fingers rested lightly on her lap. Around her, soldiers murmured, glancing nervously, unaware that the woman beside them was a walking ledger of battlefield carnage. They would notice soon enough, but not yet. The sun blazed outside, a false promise of calm before the storm. As the helicopter lifted, the earth dropped from view, the wind howling, dust rising like ghosts below. She stared out the window, jaw set, mind cataloging every movement, every possible threat. The hum of the rotors vibrated through her chest, syncing with the rhythm of old nightmares and practiced responses. She remembered every mission, every loss, every medal, every wound. 5 Purple Hearts, 5 battles survived against odds that would have broken most. She exhaled slowly, letting the air clear the tension in her lungs, but not the tension in her mind. And then the radio crackled. Static first, then a voice sharp and urgent. "Lieutenant Green, we need an extra pair of eyes at the rear door. Enemy movement coordinates incoming. Immediate response required." The voice trembled slightly with anticipation. Soldiers glanced at one another. The rookie beside her paled, hands gripping the seat. Eyes turned toward her instinctively. She rose slowly, every motion calm, deliberate, unnerving in its precision. She stepped toward the rear ramp. The wind tore at her uniform, blowing hair across her face. Dust and rotor wash whipped around her stinging eyes, but she didn't flinch. The others hesitated. She turned her head briefly, letting her hazel eyes meet theirs, and in that moment they understood what had been whispered in briefings, passed in rumors, and hinted at in legends. This wasn't fresh training. This was a survivor, a soldier who had danced with death 5 times and lived to tell it. The helicopter climbed higher, engines screaming, carrying them into an uncertain sky. Below, the Afghan terrain stretched in rocky undulations, barren, harsh, unforgiving. Ahead, danger waited. And at that moment, the entire unit realized that the quiet, young woman in the back, the one everyone had assumed would break under pressure, might very well be the difference between survival and disaster. She gripped the oilcloth in her jacket, the faint weight of the 5 Purple Hearts pressing against her chest. She inhaled, steadying herself. Every muscle coiled, every thought calculated, every instinct alert. Because she had learned long ago that experience could not be faked, medals could not be ignored, and courage, once earned, demanded action. The rookie beside her trembled, voice barely audible. "Ma'am, how are you?" She didn't answer immediately. She only stared ahead, scanning the terrain below, counting distances, angles, and possibilities. Her fingers flexed, brushing the metals beneath her jacket. Then she whispered to herself, almost as a promise, "Not today, not this time." And at that moment, as the helicopter tilted over a ridge and the first glint of danger caught the sun, she realized the others would have to see what true courage looked like, and soon. Because the storm was already waiting for them, and it didn't care who was ready or who was. Her hazel eyes narrowed. The wind tore at her uniform. Dust and danger swirled together, and somewhere in the hum of rotors and the smell of dust and sweat, she knew the next moments would test everything she had survived so far and leave the rest scrambling to keep up. The hangar smelled of oil, sweat, and the metallic tang of military-grade machinery. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh against the early morning gloom. She followed the unit inside, keeping to the back as the captain began briefing the mission. The board flashed routes into Helmand Province, coordinates stretching like veins across the map. Casualties were understated, probabilities glossed over. Soldiers leaned forward, some nodding, some flipping notes, all calculating risk, but she didn't. She had been here before in worse conditions, with fewer resources and higher stakes. The quiet confidence she carried radiated in small, unsettling ways. A young sergeant beside her nudged another and whispered, "Who even is she?" Eyes drifted subtly, scanning her crisp uniform, her posture, the way she adjusted her bag strap with mechanical precision. Fresh training. They assumed ignorance, inexperience. She let them. Pretending to be inexperienced was safer. The truth would terrify them if it emerged too soon. She had learned the hard way that perception was a weapon, sometimes sharper than bullets. The captain gestured at the map, voice clipped and efficient. Routes Delta through Echo. Casualty evacuation points 3 and 6. Watch sectors A and B air cover ETA 40 minutes. Notes scratched across boards. Soldiers nodded, murmurs filling the room. She traced the routes with her finger, silently calculating escape angles, ambush points, cover options, and the lethal likelihood of each maneuver. Her fingers brushed over her jacket pocket, feeling the 5 purple hearts beneath the oilcloth. They were a silent weight, reminders that she had survived far worse than any theoretical exercise on a briefing board. The crate arrived. A medic pushed it forward, sweat streaking his forehead. Metal clinked as the lid was lifted. A glint of purple caught the room's attention. Soldiers froze. She knelt gracefully, eyes calm, fingers brushing each metal. The room was silent. She didn't speak. The 5 purple hearts were displayed with quiet reverence, their significance impossible to ignore. The captain's gaze hardened, recalculating authority, rethinking assumptions. Around her, the unit collectively held its breath. Here was a soldier whose past couldn't be faked, whose presence demanded acknowledgement, though none dared speak it aloud yet. The tension shifted, murmurs circulated. 5, one whispered. Another shook his head, unable to believe it. She returned the medals to their oilcloth, securing them under her jacket. The small, deliberate motion spoke volumes. She owned her past, but she didn't need recognition. The captain cleared his throat, forcing the group back into focus. "Mount up in 5 minutes," he barked. Orders resumed their rhythm. The soldiers moved with renewed precision, but the undercurrent of curiosity remained. The woman in the back, soft-spoken, calm, was no myth. She was real. She stood, dusting her knees, and caught sight of a rookie fumbling with a rifle. Without looking up, she corrected his grip, adjusting his stance, calming his jittering hands with the barest gesture. "Relax your shoulders," she murmured, voice soft but commanding. The rookie blinked, stunned. The medic who had unveiled the medals nodded subtly. "She's not just experience. She's legend," he whispered to himself, eyes tracing her calm, measured movements. Outside, rotors thrummed in the distance, announcing their imminent departure. The captain checked watches, voice now clipped with tension. 10 minutes to lift. Soldiers scrambled, loading gear into helicopters, strapping themselves in, testing weapons. She followed routine flawlessly, every movement practiced, economical. She was part of the rhythm now, yet separate, something the unit couldn't yet define. Rumors had been whispered in briefings, hints passed between tour. The woman who survived 5 hits and lived. No one had believed it, until now. The silence after her movements carried weight, a cautionary tension that no training could teach. The youngest soldier, barely 19, nudged the sergeant beside him. She's wearing," his voice faltered. The sergeant shook his head, warning him silently. Words could get you in trouble in more ways than one, but the recognition lingered like a ripple across the unit. 5 purple hearts. 5 times the army had marked her for injury, each one a brutal lesson in survival. Nobody spoke of the specific battles. Stories like that never circulated outside top-tier briefings, but the weight of them was palpable. She carried history, proof, and a quiet menace in every step. Helicopters began to whine, engines whining louder, vibrating the floor under boots. Dust lifted like spirits disturbed by the chaos. Orders shouted. Soldiers moved, strapping harnesses, checking radios, rifles. She followed protocol without haste, a deliberate pace, eyes scanning, reading angles. She wasn't anxious. The unit's eyes kept flicking to her, the murmurs rising in volume despite themselves. Why is she still alive?" whispered one. Another shook his head, uneasy. 5 times hit and she's here. The weight of disbelief hung over the hangar like smoke from a distant fire. The first pilot appeared at the ramp, signaling for the boarding. She stepped forward, allowing others to pass first, observing how the rookies faltered under their own fear. She adjusted her duffel bag strap and breathed slowly. Every step measured, every glance purposeful. She had been here before, though the terrain and faces were different. The helicopter tilting beneath her boots carried the promise of danger that she had learned to read as instinct. The unit would learn too, whether they wanted to or not. She entered the chopper last, seating herself near the rear, scanning the others without seeming to. Soldiers whispered, pointing subtly, curiosity and unease tangled together. The rookie beside her swallowed hard, staring at her uniform, her calm demeanor, the hint of metals that refused to stay hidden. She didn't acknowledge it. Knowledge was a weapon, and she wielded it lightly, watching reactions, nodding weakness. Around her, the atmosphere thickened with expectation. Something had shifted. The mission had already changed, and no one fully understood why. The helicopter lifted, engines roaring in a deafening, steady rhythm. Dust swirled below like disturbed ghosts. She adjusted her seat, checked the harness, and scanned the terrain through tinted windows. The landscape stretched in jagged ridges, dry and unforgiving. Her mind cataloged escape routes, ambush points, and lines of fire instinctively. The rookie beside her fumbled, fingers gripping the edge of his seat. She glanced at him, calm, reassuring, eyes locking with his. "Steady," she said quietly. No hesitation, no panic, just preparation. Static hissed from the radio. Lieutenant Green, rear door, coordinates incoming. Enemy movement, immediate response required. The voice trembled slightly with urgency. Soldiers froze, hesitation rippling. She rose slowly, without haste, movements deliberate, unnerving in precision. Eyes followed her. They had no idea what they were about to witness. Her body and mind were a weapon honed over fire, pain, and survival. The medals beneath her jacket were warnings, not trophies, and the unit would soon understand why. As the helicopter tilted over a ridge, sun glinting off distant metal, she gripped the oilcloth beneath her jacket. 5 purple hearts, 5 scars, 5 reminders of battles that could have ended her story. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself, every instinct alert, every muscle coiled. She knew the storm ahead wouldn't care about rank, age, or assumptions. Only survival mattered, and she intended to ensure it. The rookie beside her whispered again, trembling, How do you?" She didn't answer. Eyes forward, scanning terrain, counting angles, distances, and probabilities. Every instinct sharpened, every breath deliberate. The others watched, realization dawning. This was not a fresh recruit. This was someone who had walked through hell 5 times and survived. Someone who would teach them about courage, about resilience, about the cost of living when the odds were against you. The helicopter pitched forward, wind tearing uniforms, dust and dirt stinging faces. Below, the ridges and valleys stretched in dry, jagged waves. Danger was imminent. And she, the quiet, young woman at the back, was already preparing to act, to survive, and to lead. Her hazel eyes narrowed. Fingers brushed the metals beneath her jacket. The storm was coming, and it wouldn't wait. Neither would she. And then the first faint shimmer of movement appeared below. The helicopter shuddered as it cut through the thinning morning air. Dust and gravel swirled beneath them, whipped by the rotors into ghostly spirals that danced across the rugged terrain below. She tightened the straps on her harness, eyes scanning every movement along the ridges and valleys. The unit around her was tense, murmurs barely audible over the roar of the engines. Each soldier gripped his weapon as if it were a talisman against the unknown, but she remained calm, muscles coiled, every sense alert. She had been here before in far worse conditions, when death moved silent and swift. The rookie beside her gagged on nerves, stomach twisting violently, hands gripping the seat like it could anchor him to sanity. She glanced at him briefly, offering a steadying nod and the barest touch on his shoulder. "Focus. Watch angles, count seconds, don't freeze," she said, voice low, calm, deceptively ordinary. Her words had the weight of authority, though she held no rank higher than any other lieutenant. It was the unspoken knowledge behind them, the kind earned under fire, that carried real command. Below, the terrain was an unforgiving tapestry of rock and sand, broken ridges casting jagged shadows across the valleys. She counted the dips and rises instinctively, scanning for movement, anticipating enemy positioning. Her mind cataloged every anomaly, a jutting rock, a thin line of shadow, a glint of metal. Years of combat had sharpened her instincts to a blade. 5 purple hearts weren't just recognition. They were proof she had survived fire, shrapnel, ambushes and betrayal from angles no one anticipated. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. Touchdown in 2 minutes, prepare for hot insertion. Watch sectors, hostile movement reported in the northeast ridge. We are not alone. The words hung heavy in the air. The soldiers around her stiffened. Her hazel eyes narrowed. Hot insertion was dangerous. Helicopters were vulnerable while landing, and ambushes were brutal. She flexed her fingers around the oilcloth beneath her jacket, feeling the silent weight of her metals pressing close, as if reminding her of lessons learned under fire. The young soldiers beside her didn't understand the significance. They were about to learn. The helicopter banked, lowering toward a narrow clearing. The rotors churned up dust and debris, whipping eyes, mouths, and gear. The landing ramp opened with a screech and the unit moved as trained, but hesitation rippled like a hidden current. She stood, muscles fluid, stepping to the edge with quiet authority. The world narrowed to the moment, the drop, the landing, the inevitable confrontation. She gripped her rifle lightly, assessing angles, movement, threats, and lines of fire simultaneously. Below, figures moved against the ridges, their shadows shifting unnaturally. Tracer fire flickered far in the distance, the glint of bullets catching the sunlight. The soldiers flinched, scanning rapidly. She didn't flinch. Her memory flashed. Kandahar, second deployment, night raid under relentless fire, hands pressing wounds shut, dragging comrades to safety. The lessons were all here, in reflexes, in timing, in knowing which life mattered first. Her mind cataloged, sorted, prioritized. Survival wasn't an option, it was a process. The pilot shouted, "Go, go, go!" and the first wave jumped into the dust-choked air. She followed immediately, landing with precision, feet steady on the rocky ground. The sound of incoming rounds shattered the morning calm. The hot insertion had landed them in the heart of enemy territory. Soldiers scrambled, bullets slicing through air, ricochets cracking against metal and stone. Chaos descended, but she was methodical, unshaken, moving with practiced efficiency. A grenade exploded nearby, sending a wave of dust and heat over her. She dove forward instinctively, dragging a gunner to cover. His arm was bleeding, red streaking through dust and grime. She tore a strap from her duffel, wrapping it tightly, pressing it against the wound. "Stay with me. Breathe. Count to 10, she commanded, calm, precise. The sergeant beside her froze in panic. She gripped his vest, anchoring him in reality. He followed. Minutes stretched into eternities. The enemy fire was relentless, but her movements were precise. She directed the rookies, repositioning them, shouting instructions, pulling the wounded to safer positions. Her experience radiated, invisible yet undeniable, as soldiers began to mimic her instincts, moving with newly inspired coordination. She glanced at her oilcloth again, the weight of 5 purple hearts pressing against her chest, a reminder that survival came at a cost. "Lieutenant Green," a voice shouted. "We're pinned, need covering fire." She turned, eyes scanning rapidly, and ordered a team to suppress fire. Her voice was authoritative but calm. She could see angles that others couldn't, instinctively knowing when to strike, when to hold, and when to retreat. Her body moved with precision born of repeated trauma, repeated victory, repeated survival. Every wound earned, every medal pinned, every scar carved into her flesh had led to this moment. Another blast shook the ground nearby, kicking up rock and dust. She was thrown to the ground, grit and stone tearing at her uniform. She rolled, scanning for movement, catching the trajectory of enemy fire. Instinctively, she countered, directing the soldiers to move behind cover, providing support. The rookie beside her whimpered, frozen. She grabbed him, thrusting him forward with clear, unhesitant authority. "Move. Trust your instincts." She dragged him behind a crumbling wall, calming him with a few quick words, her fingers brushing his shaking hands. The lieutenant recognized the rhythm of survival immediately, the economy of movement, the prioritization of life over ego, the precision of response. He shouted her name, asking where she had trained. Her answer, clipped between breaths and fire, stunned him. "Everywhere it counts." There was no time for further explanation. Survival demanded action, not conversation. Around her, soldiers began to understand instinctually that she was no ordinary lieutenant, no ordinary recruit, No ordinary soldier. The sun climbed higher, glinting off metal and weaponry. She moved systematically, scanning and countering, positioning wounded where they could survive, directing fire with minimal words. The chaos around her bent to her presence, a magnetic pull that organized disorder. Tracer rounds illuminated the dust like sinister fireworks. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to recall each Purple Heart, the explosions, the pain, the friends lost, the moments she swore she wouldn't survive. They were all here now, fueling precision, determination, and unbreakable resolve. An enemy sniper revealed position atop a ridge, firing with deliberate intent. Soldiers froze, panic threatening to spread. She didn't hesitate. Rifle up, finger steady, eyes narrowing, she aimed, tracked, and returned fire. The sniper dropped. The unit blinked in disbelief. She didn't celebrate. There was no time. Bullets still screamed nearby. Another attack came from the flank. She pivoted, dragging another soldier to cover, issuing commands, her voice calm yet commanding. Every movement was efficiency, instinct, and survival honed to perfection. Minutes later, the chaos slowed. Soldiers checked themselves and each other. Casualties were present but not overwhelming. She crouched against a rock, shaking slightly, not from fear but from release. She checked pulses methodically, assessing the wounded, ensuring that life continued. Around her, the unit stared, awestruck. A young sergeant whispered, voice barely audible, "I didn't think anyone could." She only smiled faintly, glancing down at the oilcloth beneath her jacket. 5 Purple Hearts. Proof that the unimaginable could be survived, that courage wasn't theoretical, that discipline and instinct could save lives when chaos demanded it. The lieutenant beside her shook his head, realizing that the woman they assumed was fresh training had already rewritten the rulebook for survival in this mission. Above, helicopters hovered, rotors slicing air, signaling extraction. The storm wasn't over. Danger still lurked. But for now, the unit had survived the first test, and they had survived because of her. The awareness settled like a stone in their stomachs. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a force, a tactical prodigy forged in fire, pain, and repeated impossibilities. The rookie beside her, white-faced and trembling, looked at her again. How did you?" She didn't answer. Eyes forward, scanning the horizon. Rotors whined. Dust and light merged in hazy patterns. The next threat could come from anywhere, and she intended to ensure everyone made it through, just as she had done 5 times before. She inhaled, steady, focusing on the movement, the angles, the next steps. Somewhere in the valley, shadows shifted. The storm wasn't over. And she was ready. The valley below had settled into an eerie, uneasy quiet. Dust hung thick in the air, swirling in patches under the fatting morning sun. For a heartbeat, it seemed the chaos had passed. But she knew better. Experience was a cruel teacher, and the lull before the storm was never truly calm. Her hazel eyes scanned the rocky ridges, every shadow a potential threat. 5 Purple Hearts pressed against her chest beneath the oilcloth, a silent reminder of battles survived. Each medal was a warning. This woman had faced death 5 times and returned with her skills sharpened like a blade. The unit hesitated, unsure whether to move forward or stay pinned. The young sergeant beside her trembled, pale with adrenaline. A medic crouched, checking supplies, muttering under his breath. Their fear was natural, expected, but she couldn't allow it to compromise survival. She moved first, stepping lightly but decisively, assessing cover and angles, signaling with subtle gestures. Every motion commanded attention without words. They followed, reluctantly at first, then with growing confidence as her presence anchored them. The first blast tore through the ridge above them, sending rock and dirt cascading down in showers of violence. Shouts rang out. Soldiers scrambled, some falling, others firing blindly. She dropped to the ground instinctively, dragging a gunner out of the spray of shrapnel. His arm was shattered, crimson spilling through dust and sweat. Without hesitation, she tore a strap from her duffel, wrapping it tightly around the wound. "Stay with me," she barked. "Breathe, count, hold it." Her voice was calm, commanding, inflexible, a lifeline amid chaos. Another blast rocked the area. The young sergeant froze, eyes wide. She grabbed his vest, anchoring him. Move, trust your training. The words were simple, but they carried authority. She guided him behind a low wall of rubble, then crouched, scanning the ridges for the enemy. Her body moved with precision, suppressive fire, cover, extraction routes, all calculated instinctively. She had done this countless times before in far harsher conditions, under fire that would have broken others. The soldiers began to move with her rhythm, following her cues without question. The lieutenant realized the pattern immediately. She moved through chaos with efficiency that defied human expectation. Hands steady, eyes sharp, her mind cataloged angles, distances, and probabilities. She was everywhere at once, pulling the wounded, directing fire, coordinating cover. Each action was economical, precise, deliberate. She never wasted emotion. Her experience was a force multiplier, bending the chaotic firefight to a strange, ordered rhythm. The soldiers began to understand instinctively that she was more than a survivor. She was a strategist forged by fire. Tracers zipped across the rocky terrain. Another soldier fell, crying out as a bullet tore through his sleeve. She didn't hesitate. Rushing forward, she pressed her body against his, dragging him behind cover. A grenade went off nearby, shaking the ground, sending debris flying. She held her breath for a fraction of a second, calculating trajectory and force, then rolled to shield him from fragments. Around her, the unit struggled to maintain composure. She became the axis of their focus, the anchor in the storm. Enemy fire intensified from a concealed ridge. She pivoted, aiming and returning fire without hesitation. Her rifle moved fluidly, fingers steady, breath measured. Another soldier froze, paralyzed by fear. She grabbed him by the vest, yanking him into cover, pointing out enemy positions. "Do not freeze, move, now," he obeyed, trembling but alive. She glanced at the oilcloth beneath her jacket. 5 purple hearts. Proof that her survival had not been luck. It had been earned through repeated trials, each leaving a scar etched in memory and body. The captain's voice came over comms, tense. "Lieutenant Green, we're pinned, need suppression, enemy flanking left." She didn't flinch. She assessed quickly. Suppressive fire, flank angle, extraction route, wounded prioritization. Orders flowed from her with minimal words. Soldiers moved as though they anticipated them instinctively. Bullets zipped past, ricocheting off stone and metal. She ducked behind cover, shouted positions, dragged a wounded rifleman to safety, and returned fire. Her movements were a masterclass in battlefield efficiency, a demonstration of instinct, courage, and cold calculation. A blast threw her to the ground, grit tearing at her uniform, dust in her eyes. She rolled, scanning for threats, then pushed herself up. Another soldier fell nearby, screaming from a shrapnel wound. Without hesitation, she ripped another strap from her duffel, wrapping it around the arm, pressing firmly to stem blood flow. "Stay with me," she repeated. The simplicity of the words was their power. Amid chaos, she provided certainty, a calm command that gave focus to fear. The lieutenant beside her shouted, asking how she had trained, expecting an answer that would sound mythical. She didn't pause. "Everywhere it counts," she said, voice low, clipped between breaths and gunfire. No elaboration. Explanation would have wasted time. Survival demanded action, not speeches. Around her, the unit began to adapt, moving in a rhythm that matched hers. Coordination emerged from chaos, not because of luck, but because she had learned to impose order through sheer experience. Minutes stretched into eternities. The enemy fire ebbed and flowed like waves. She crouched against a rock, checking pulses and wounds methodically, ensuring life continued. Her hazel eyes scanned constantly, calculating every possibility, anticipating every threat. Soldiers around her began to whisper, awestruck. The young sergeant muttered, voice barely audible, She's not like anyone I've seen." She only nodded faintly, glancing at the oilcloth beneath her jacket. 5 purple hearts, 5 wounds endured, 5 reminders that survival demanded skill, courage, and discipline. The weight of her past informed every decision in the present. The lieutenant beside her realized that she had rewritten the rules of engagement for this unit. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a force of nature, capable of bending the chaos of battle into something resembling control. The sun rose higher, glinting off metal and sand. Enemy movement shifted. She pivoted again, dragging a wounded soldier into cover, returning fire with unerring precision. The unit followed her cues instinctively. The storm of bullets and debris was relentless, but she moved through it like a phantom, guiding them, protecting them, and maintaining focus. She was calm, deliberate, unbroken, a testament to battles survived, lessons learned, and courage forged in fire. Finally, a lull settled over the valley. The soldiers checked themselves and each other. Casualties were present but not overwhelming. She crouched briefly, exhaling slowly, letting her muscles relax for the first time. Around her, the unit stared, awestruck, realizing the young woman they had assumed to be fresh training had survived, and led through a firefight that could have annihilated them all. The rookie beside her whispered, trembling, How did you do it?" She didn't answer, eyes forward, scanning for any sign of renewed danger. The rotors above whined as extraction helicopters hovered. Dust swirled, sun glinted, and somewhere in the valley, shadows shifted. The enemy had not disappeared. The storm was not over. But for now they had survived, and they had survived because of her. She exhaled slowly, steady, and felt the weight of the Purple Hearts beneath her jacket, a constant reminder that the next threat would come, and that she would be ready. The valley was quiet, too quiet. And in that silence, she knew the real test was still coming. Dawn crept slowly over the rugged Afghan terrain, painting the valley in harsh, cold light. The sand and rock glinted like shards of glass, reflecting the toll of the night. The firefight had ended, or at least paused, but its echoes lingered everywhere. Twisted metal, spent casings, dust-streaked uniforms, and the low groans of the wounded. She crouched beside a makeshift barricade, hands moving with calm precision, checking pulses, applying pressure to bleeding limbs, and cataloging injuries. Each movement deliberate, every breath measured. Around her, the unit stirred, faces pale, hands trembling, processing survival as if disbelief alone could break it. The young sergeant from earlier shifted uncomfortably beside her, glancing at the medics. His eyes widened when he noticed the scars barely visible beneath her uniform. "Lieutenant, you're your arms, your chest." His voice faltered. She said nothing. She simply opened her jacket slowly, exposing the oilcloth beneath, the 5 purple hearts glinting in the early light. Dust clung to them, catching the sun like tiny warnings pinned in metal. The air in the valley seemed to stiffen, the weight of their significance pressing on everyone present. Captain approached, his face pale, jaw tight. He had seen many soldiers survive, but few with the efficiency, precision, and composure she had demonstrated. His eyes flicked to the medals, then back to her face, calculating, rethinking. 5 purple hearts, he asked quietly, disbelief mingling with awe. She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze swept over the unit, counting, assessing, prioritizing. "I've been hit 5 times, she said finally, voice steady. "I'm still here, so are you. Focus on that." Medics began triage in earnest, assessing the wounded, marking those who could move, those who needed immediate evacuation, and those clinging to life. She moved seamlessly through the chaos, directing attention where it was needed most. A rifleman groaned from pain, a gash across his thigh, blood soaking through fabric. She knelt beside him, pulling clean cloth from her bag, wrapping it tightly, pressing with precision. "Stay conscious. Count with me. 1, 2, 3. Her calm authority grounded the unit, gave focus to panic, and converted fear into survival instinct. The lieutenant who had observed her from the beginning watched in awe, notebook in hand. Where did you train?" he finally asked, voice hesitant. She met his gaze, calm and unwavering. "Everywhere it mattered, everywhere I had to survive, everywhere I learned to move faster, think quicker, and care less about fear than about keeping people alive." He nodded, understanding dawning. The story behind the medals was one of pain, endurance, and experience so deep it could not be faked. A colonel arrived mid-morning, helicopter setting down dust clouds in his wake. He had been briefed on the incident, but nothing in reports had prepared him for what he saw on the ground. A lieutenant, apparently young and untested, moving with authority that radiated survival. Casualties had been minimized, but the coordination, timing, and leadership she demonstrated had been extraordinary. He studied the medals, then her face, then the unit, calculating what this meant for the chain of command, for orders, and for reputation. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she moved through the wounded, checking vitals, stabilizing bleeding, and reassuring the terrified. Every word measured, every gesture precise. Soldiers whispered among themselves, awestruck by the composure, courage, and authority radiating from the woman they had assumed to be fresh training. She was a paradox, young and unassuming, yet lethal, calm, and unbroken. She had earned not just the Purple Hearts, but the respect and fear they inspired. One of the rookies, shaking, glanced at the medals and whispered, How can someone survive that many times?" She glanced at him, eyes softening for the briefest fraction of a second. "Luck isn't part of it," she said quietly. "Preparation, instinct, and willingness to keep moving when everyone else freezes, that's what matters. 5 times, yes, but it's not the number that counts. It's what you do after each one. That's what survival is." The colonel's presence grew more insistent. He stepped closer, examining the Purple Hearts in silence, noting their alignment, wear, and the faint marks along the edges, evidence of field service, trauma, and repeated injury. "Lieutenant Green," he said finally, voice low, calculated, "we need a full report on your missions. Now." She nodded once, measured. "After the wounded are stabilized," she said. "That is my priority, lives first. Recognition later." Helicopters hovered, ready for evacuation. Casualties were loaded first, then essential equipment. She moved with them, overseeing the order of operations, her calm focus ensuring efficiency amid residual tension. Soldiers who had been terrified hours earlier followed her cues instinctively. Every movement, every instruction, every glance carried weight. Even those who had doubted her, underestimated her, now recognized the extraordinary depth behind the calm exterior. The colonel leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. 5 Purple Hearts, that means," he let the statement hang. She looked at him, neutral, unreadable. "It means I survived," she said simply. "That's all you need to know for now." He nodded, impressed and unsettled. Legends like hers did not often walk through regular units unnoticed. Her presence complicated everything, protocol, planning, hierarchy, but it also guaranteed survival where rules alone would have failed. As the sun climbed higher, casting long, sharp shadows, she moved to a fallen comrade, hands precise as she checked vitals, stabilized wounds, and prepared him for evacuation. Her movements were seamless, practiced, almost surgical. Soldiers around her began to whisper again, awestruck. The unit had survived because she had commanded with instinct, authority, and relentless courage. The battlefield had tested them all, and she had stood as the axis of their survival. And yet, even as helicopters lifted the wounded and supplies, tension remained. The enemy had retreated for now, but they were still out there, and the next encounter could be worse. She scanned the ridges, angles, and valleys, noting debris, shadows, and signs of movement. Every instinct screamed that the battle was not over. The valley had claimed silence for only a brief moment. Danger lingered, waiting for any misstep, any lapse, any miscalculation. The lieutenant beside her, still trembling, whispered, I don't think I've ever seen anyone." She didn't respond immediately. She straightened, brushed dust from her uniform, and adjusted the oilcloth over her Purple Hearts. "Remember this," she said quietly, voice firm but calm. "Focus, stay alert, move deliberately. Panic kills more than bullets. That's the lesson you take from today." She glanced at the horizon, scanning, measuring. Her mind cataloged the next steps, anticipating enemy reaction, planning extraction, and calculating survival. The lessons of 5 Purple Hearts were embedded in every gesture, every movement, every command. The colonel called the unit together. "Lieutenant Green," he said, voice low, serious, and commanding, "we need a full debrief. Your actions extraordinary. You've rewritten what we expect from leadership under fire." She nodded. "After the wounded are secure," she repeated. Her priority was clear. Recognition, medals, and accolades could wait. Lives could not. The unit moved as one toward the extraction point, every soldier aware, every movement deliberate. Dust swirled beneath their boots. The sun reflected off metal, weapons, and the faint glint of her Purple Hearts beneath the oilcloth. Stories of survival, courage, and leadership were written in actions, not words, and she had written a chapter no one present would forget. And somewhere in the shifting shadows of the ridges, enemy eyes watched, calculating, plotting. The storm wasn't over. But for now, they had survived because of her. The valley seemed almost peaceful, but she knew better. The calm before the next storm was dangerous, and she would be ready, always ready. And when the next threat came, the 5 purple hearts she carried would not just mark her past. They would demand respect, obedience, and survival from anyone who stood beside her. The convoy pushed north through jagged alleys and barren ridges, engines roaring, dust curling in long spirals behind armored vehicles. Sunlight reflected harshly off the sand, washing out colors, flattening angles, but not her focus. She rode point, scanning every rock formation, every shadow, every glint of metal that could signal a threat. Her fingers brushed the oilcloth beneath her jacket. 5 purple hearts pressed against her chest like a silent compass, guiding instincts honed through years of fire, blood, and repeated impossibilities. The soldiers beside her felt the weight without understanding it. Minutes stretched taut as wires under tension. The rookie she had steadied in the previous engagement remained close, eyes darting nervously at every movement. He trembled as engines hummed, weapons clutched too tightly, adrenaline pumping. She leaned forward slightly, voice quiet but firm. "Watch your sectors, count distances, anticipate movement, don't react, act." Her calm authority radiated across the convoy. Fear rippled like water, and her presence smoothed it, gave it direction. The soldiers began to move as if guided by some invisible hand, each motion deliberate, each decision tempered by her influence. A sudden crack echoed from a nearby ridge, dust flared, bullets zipped past, ricocheting off metal and stone. The convoy jerked violently. Soldiers shouted, ducked, and fired in reaction. She dropped to one knee instinctively, scanning rapidly. "Move, flank left, cover fire now." Her voice carried the authority of someone who had been tested and had survived repeated encounters with death. Her hands moved fluidly, directing fire, motioning soldiers to cover, pulling the wounded behind armored vehicles. Every action was deliberate, precise, and lethal in its efficiency. The young sergeant froze for a moment, terror pinning him in place. She gripped his vest and yanked him behind cover. "Move, don't freeze, now." Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, communicated urgency and clarity. The man followed without hesitation, recognizing instinctively that hesitation here could cost his life. Around her, the convoy began to reorganize, rallying to her rhythm. The enemy fire continued, but it was no longer chaotic. It was a structured engagement, choreographed by her presence, her decisions, and her unshakable focus. A grenade exploded near the rear of the convoy, throwing dust and debris into the air. She rolled forward, pressing her body against the wounded rifleman sprawled beneath shattered sandbags. His arm was bleeding heavily. Without hesitation, she tore a strap from her duffel and pressed it firmly against the wound. "Stay with me. Breathe. Count. 1, 2, 3. Her calm voice was an anchor, grounding him in the chaos. The grenade's echo faded, leaving ringing silence punctuated by sporadic gunfire, and the soldiers began to understand the difference between panic and survival. Enemy forces revealed themselves on a ridge to the east, firing with deliberate intent. Soldiers scrambled, returning fire with varying degrees of accuracy. She aimed carefully, moved methodically, and fired when necessary, each shot measured, each decision calculated. Another soldier hesitated, frozen by fear. She grabbed him by the vest and thrust him behind cover, pointing to enemy positions. "Do not freeze. Move. Engage. Now." Her voice brooked no argument. Her confidence, honed over countless engagements, became contagious, forcing the rookies and veterans alike to adapt rapidly. Minutes dragged like hours. The convoy pressed forward, navigating narrow streets and open terrain under relentless threat. Her eyes flicked constantly to every ridge, every shadow, every movement that could signify danger. She counted bullets, angles, and distance in microseconds. Every instinct screamed at her, honed from years of facing ambushes, IEDs, and sniper fire. She had survived 5 separate encounters that left others broken. 5 Purple Hearts were not just medals. They were a testament to experience, intuition, and unflinching courage. A lieutenant beside her shouted into the comms, panic creeping into his voice. "Lieutenant Green, we're pinned. Reinforcements delayed, casualties increasing." She didn't flinch. She assessed the position in seconds, calculated angles of fire, determined the safest extraction points. She issued orders succinctly, like a conductor guiding an orchestra through chaos. Suppressive fire left flank, cover by armored vehicle, extract wounded now, maintain distance, move. The unit responded instinctively, their movements synchronized with hers. She had transformed chaos into order, fear into action. A sniper on a ridge opened fire, his rounds slicing through the air. She ducked instinctively, returned fire with pinpoint precision, and signaled the convoy to move strategically, avoiding exposed lines. Another soldier froze in place. She grabbed his shoulder, yanking him behind cover while simultaneously scanning for additional threats. The intensity of her coordination left the lieutenant beside her shaking. Where did you learn to do this?" he asked, breathless. She didn't answer, eyes never leaving the battlefield. Experience, she knew, spoke louder than explanations. The convoy continued its push, slowly gaining ground. She moved along the front, eyes alert, hands ready, mind cataloging every movement of both her unit and the enemy. Explosions rocked the terrain intermittently, sending plumes of dust and debris into the air. She guided the wounded to safety, calculated suppressive fire, and maintained constant communication with the convoy's command. Her presence was a force multiplier. Rookies acted with confidence they didn't know they had, and seasoned soldiers adjusted their tactics to match hers. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity. Sweat and dust-caked uniforms burned, stung, and muscles ached. Yet she remained focused, composed, and deadly efficient. A young soldier collapsed under stress, breathing shallowly. She knelt, pressing a hand to his chest, assessing vitals, calming him. "Steady, you're alive, breathe." Around her, the unit began to understand instinctively that she was more than leadership. She was survival incarnate, a guide through fire, bullets, and terror. Suddenly, the comms crackled urgently. "Lieutenant Green, Northern Sector compromised. Immediate support required. Enemy regrouping." Her hazel eyes narrowed. She inhaled, centering herself. She signaled the convoy, directing a flank maneuver while simultaneously preparing to engage the threat directly. Every calculation, every decision, every movement carried life-or-death consequences. Her mind worked in perfect synchronization with her body, honed from years of facing death, injuries, and relentless combat. The soldiers around her followed her cues instinctively, moving with a precision that surprised even seasoned veterans. They had learned from observation, from fear, and from necessity. She didn't speak unnecessarily, every word measured, every command concise. The battlefield responded to her presence, bending to her experience, and the enemy began to falter under the unexpected efficiency of her leadership. Finally, as the convoy reached a temporary high ground, she paused briefly, scanning the area. Casualties were minimized, lines of fire controlled, and the enemy had been repelled, for now. She exhaled slowly, pressing a hand to the oilcloth beneath her jacket. 5 Purple Hearts. 5 reminders that she had survived encounters that would have shattered most. She had earned her presence, and her unit's lives depended on the instincts those medals represented. The rookie beside her, shaking, whispered, I didn't think anyone could do this." She glanced at him, calm, unyielding. "It's not luck, it's preparation, observation, and willingness to act when others freeze. Remember that. Survival is a choice every second, every step." She turned her eyes back to the horizon. The Northern Sector awaited. Danger was never absent, only delayed. The storm of bullets, shadows, and threats continued to move in waves. She would be ready, always. And the soldiers around her understood something fundamental. This was not fresh training. This was experience, honed to deadly perfection. This was leadership born of fire, sacrifice, and sheer will. And when the next threat came, they would follow her without hesitation, or they would not survive. She breathed steady. The convoy pressed forward, dust swirling, engines roaring, bullets still slicing air, and her mind catalogued every possible outcome. The battlefield had shifted. She had changed it, and the enemy would soon realize they were facing someone far beyond their expectations. The next wave of danger was coming, and she would meet it. The rotors of the helicopter chopped the early morning air, a harsh rhythm against the silence of the valley. Dust and debris swirled behind them, carrying the scent of spent gunpowder, sweat, and the metallic tang of blood. Inside the cabin, the soldiers sat in exhausted silence, weapons resting loosely across laps, eyes hollow from adrenaline. The battlefield behind them was a grim reminder of the chaos they had survived, but the valley ahead promised nothing but uncertainty. She sat apart, hands folded over the oilcloth beneath her jacket, her hazel eyes scanning, cataloging, calculating. 5 purple hearts pressed against her chest, a quiet testament to the fire she had walked through. The young rookie from the previous engagements glanced nervously at her, voice barely audible above the roar of engines. "Lieutenant, I've never seen anyone survive 5 times." She didn't answer immediately, only adjusted her seat slightly, her presence both calm and commanding. "It's not about surviving," she said finally, voice steady. "It's about living, and making sure the people around you live too. That's the lesson." Her gaze swept the cabin. Every soldier listened instinctively, as if her words alone could shape instinct and guide action. They touched down at the forward operating base, the hum of helicopters fading into the background as soldiers disembarked. The wounded were carried swiftly to medical tents, and she moved through the crowd with practiced precision, checking vitals, stabilizing injuries, and issuing directions. Medics and soldiers alike fell into step with her rhythm, recognizing the silent authority that had guided them through the hell of the valley. She didn't pause for recognition. Survival had always demanded efficiency over accolades. The colonel who had observed her actions in the field approached, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp and calculating. "Lieutenant Green," he said quietly, voice low enough to avoid alerting the rest of the unit. "Your actions extraordinary. I need a full debrief. Every detail. The chain of command needs to understand what occurred." She nodded without hesitation. "After the wounded are stabilized," she replied, calm but firm. "Lives first, recognition later." His gaze lingered on the 5 purple hearts beneath her jacket. The weight of those medals was not lost on him. They were proof of experience, endurance, and a resolve that few could comprehend. The base buzzed with activity. Vehicles rumbled over sand, medics moved hurriedly between tents, and soldiers unloaded supplies. Yet she moved through it all like a quiet storm, unnoticed by most, observed by a few. Her presence was magnetic, commanding respect without effort. The rookies whispered among themselves, awestruck by the calm authority emanating from a woman they had assumed to be new to combat. She had rewritten the rules of expectation. Fresh training? Hardly. She was a living legend. Inside a makeshift command tent, she began documenting the engagement in meticulous detail. Every maneuver, every casualty, every moment of critical decision-making was catalogued. Her handwriting was precise, methodical, almost surgical, reflecting the clarity of thought that had guided her through battle. She paused occasionally, hands hovering over the paper, recalling the feel of bullets whipping past, the heat of explosions, the cries of the wounded. 5 purple hearts reminded her constantly of the cost of survival, of the battles that had nearly claimed her life. A lieutenant assigned to debriefing entered hesitantly, carrying a folder. "Lieutenant Green," he began, voice careful, "we need to understand your training, your background. The unit, they need to know who they were following." She looked up, eyes steady, measuring the weight of disclosure. "You will document what you observed. You will note that the actions were executed under fire with minimal casualties due to instinct, training, and decisive command. That is sufficient." Her calm authority left no room for argument. The man nodded, taking notes, eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and awe. Hours passed. The sun rose higher, casting stark light over sand and tents. Soldiers moved with renewed focus, repairing equipment, tending to the wounded, and coordinating future operations. She oversaw the activity silently, ensuring efficiency, safety, and readiness. Every decision reflected the lessons learned from years of service, each Purple Heart a reminder of survival, of discipline, of endurance. The young sergeant approached, voice hesitant. "Lieutenant, how do you do it? How do you keep going?" She paused, hands resting on the oilcloth over her medals. "Because stopping isn't an option, because there are people depending on you. Fear doesn't end the fight. Preparation, instinct, and courage do. That's all you need to know." Her hazel eyes met his, steady and unwavering. Around them, soldiers whispered, absorbing her words, sensing the depth of experience beneath her calm exterior. The weight of 5 Purple Hearts was more than recognition. It was authority, knowledge, and the gravity of lived experience. A helicopter arrived, signaling extraction for the final wounded. She oversaw the loading with precise attention, ensuring that every injured soldier was secured safely and every piece of critical equipment accounted for. The convoy moved again, engines thrumming, dust rising in spirals. Her eyes never left the terrain, scanning, calculating, anticipating. The battlefield was never truly quiet, and she knew it. Every shadow could harbor danger, every ridge a potential ambush. Instincts honed over 5 life-threatening encounters guided her movements, her focus unbroken. The colonel returned, clipboard in hand, voice quiet but firm. "Lieutenant Green, your report is remarkable, but the chain of command needs to know more. The unit, they've seen what you can do. Your actions, they're beyond expectation. They need context." She nodded, calm, measured. "Context will be provided, but only after the immediate threats are neutralized and the wounded are safe. Recognition is secondary. Survival is primary." The colonel's gaze lingered on the oilcloth beneath her jacket, understanding dawning that this was more than service. It was proof of endurance, discipline, and leadership beyond measure. Night fell over the base, casting long shadows across sand and tents. She moved quietly, checking on the last of the wounded, ensuring security measures were in place and that communication lines remained open. Soldiers around her followed instinctively, taking cues from her calm efficiency. The rookie approached, hesitant, voice barely audible above the evening hum of machinery. "Lieutenant, will it ever get easier?" She smiled faintly, a shadow of weariness behind her calm gaze. "No, but it gets survivable. Every engagement teaches you. Every scar, every medal, every Purple Heart, they remind you what matters. Instinct, courage, and keeping the people around you alive." Her hazel eyes swept the horizon, scanning the darkness, noting angles, shadows, and possibilities. She exhaled slowly, the weight of 5 Purple Hearts pressing against her chest. They were reminders of battles past, survival present, and vigilance forever. Reports came in from the field, detailing enemy movement, equipment status, and casualty numbers. She reviewed them meticulously, making notes, correcting errors, and issuing directives. Her presence was commanding, quiet, and absolute. Soldiers who had doubted her, assumed her inexperienced, now observed with respect and awe. She had survived 5 encounters that had nearly killed her. She had led through chaos, minimized casualties, and maintained control where others would have faltered. Finally, a debriefing room was prepared. Senior officers gathered, their expressions a mixture of respect and disbelief. They expected a fresh recruit, but instead encountered a woman whose actions spoke of experience, endurance, and survival beyond comprehension. She presented the report, detailing tactical maneuvers, enemy engagement, casualty mitigation, and lessons learned. Every word was precise, every fact verified, every recommendation actionable. The room was silent. The weight of her credibility, underscored by 5 Purple Hearts beneath her jacket, spoke louder than any testimony could. The colonel leaned in, voice low, almost reverent. "Lieutenant Green, 5 Purple Hearts, all in combat." She nodded, calm, measured. "Yes, all in combat, each one earned, each one survived, and each one taught me how to keep others alive." The officers exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The medals were tangible proof, but the calm authority, precision, and composure were living evidence of what the medals represented. The debrief concluded. Soldiers filed out, still whispering, still awed. The rookie approached once more, voice quiet, hesitant. "Lieutenant, I don't think anyone could ever." She interrupted gently, voice calm, steady. "You can, but you must choose to act when others freeze. Preparation, observation, instinct, courage, that's what matters. Remember it, survival depends on it." She glanced at the oilcloth beneath her jacket, 5 purple hearts glinting faintly in the dim light. They were more than awards. They were warnings, proof, and guidance. And as she looked out across the base, the night stretching cold and silent before her, she knew that survival, leadership, and courage were battles that never truly ended. But she would meet each one, as she always had, with precision, calm, and unbreakable resolve. The storm had passed for now, but the lessons of 5 purple hearts would echo through every future engagement, shaping her unit, commanding respect, and demanding survival. The battlefield waited, and she would be ready. The morning sun cut sharp lines across the base, glinting off metal surfaces and dust-coated vehicles. The quiet was deceptive. Every soldier knew the valley was a memory, but danger was never truly gone. She walked among the troops, her steps deliberate, eyes alert, scanning every ridge and shadow. The 5 purple hearts pressed against her chest beneath the oilcloth, warm reminders of a past steeped in fire, blood, and survival. They were proof that she had faced death 5 times and returned, each encounter leaving a scar invisible to the casual observer, but etched deep into muscle, mind, and instinct. Whispers followed her as she moved through the ranks. Soldiers who had survived the engagements in the valley looked at her with awe, some wide-eyed, some reverent. "Lieutenant Green," a young private murmured. "We didn't know, we thought you were fresh training." She smiled faintly, shaking her head, the expression soft but carrying weight. "Appearances are deceptive," she said quietly. "Experience is earned, survival is practiced, and courage is choice." Her report from the previous missions lay on the command table inside the debriefing tent. The colonel, senior officers, and select strategists were gathered, their expressions taut with respect, disbelief, and curiosity. They had read the report, studied her tactics, and examined her command decisions. Now they wanted to see the woman behind the actions. She entered calmly, the weight of the purple hearts beneath her jacket visible in subtle glints as she moved. The room went silent. "Lieutenant Green," the colonel began, voice steady but measured, "your actions in the valley extraordinary. The unit survived with minimal casualties because of your leadership, decisiveness, and tactical genius. We need to understand your experience. 5 purple hearts, all combat-related." She nodded, calm and deliberate. "Yes, all in combat. Each engagement required decisions that were immediate, life or death. Each one left a mark physically, mentally, and strategically. I survived, but I didn't do it alone. Every medal is proof that coordination, instinct, and discipline saved lives, not just mine." Her hazel eyes scanned the room, meeting every gaze with quiet intensity. Every officer sensed it. The woman before them was more than her appearance suggested. One of the young lieutenants raised his hand tentatively. "Ma'am, how did you maintain control? The battlefield chaos, bullets everywhere. We freeze, we panic. How do you?" She cut him off gently but firmly, voice unwavering. "Control isn't about ego, it's about focus. Observing, predicting, anticipating. You cannot be paralyzed by fear, you channel it, you use it, you act when others freeze. That's what survival demands." The room fell silent. Her words were not lectures, they were warnings, truths etched from repeated experience. 5 purple hearts were not decoration. They were a testament to decisions made, lives saved, and the unrelenting discipline to endure. Outside, the base hummed with activity. Helicopters took off, vehicles rumbled, and soldiers moved in synchronized routines. She walked among them, eyes sharp, noticing every flaw, every potential hazard, every opportunity for improvement. Her presence was a silent assertion of authority. It demanded attention without requiring volume. Soldiers instinctively adjusted to her pace, her gaze, her rhythm. She had survived 5 deadly encounters, but she also survived by ensuring others survived too. The colonel spoke again, voice low. "Lieutenant Green, your actions, they redefine leadership under fire. The chain of command, they need to understand the full impact. We need you to lead training to prepare others. Your experience is invaluable." She considered his words carefully, hands brushing the oilcloth beneath her jacket. Her mind cataloged the risks, the opportunities, and the responsibility. Leadership didn't end with survival. It extended to shaping the next generation, teaching them instinct, courage, and discipline. "I will lead," she said finally, "but survival always comes first. Training, preparation, instinct, those lessons must be earned in practice. Not theory, not assumption, action, and always vigilance." She met the colonel's gaze. "You cannot teach fear, you can only teach response." The officers nodded, some in awe, some unsettled by the intensity of her presence. 5 Purple Hearts, each earned in battles that would have ended lesser soldiers, pressed silently against her chest. They were proof that she had faced the unimaginable, survived, and returned not just with scars, but with leadership sharpened by fire. Later that evening, she walked along the perimeter of the base. The sunset painted the mountains in blood red and gold, shadows stretching long and ominous. Soldiers passed, some greeting her quietly, some merely nodding, all aware that the lieutenant who appeared to be fresh training had survived 5 encounters that would have broken most. She adjusted the strap across her shoulder, feeling the weight of the medals beneath her jacket. 5 Purple Hearts, a lifetime of stories in silence. A young sergeant approached, hesitant, eyes wide. "Ma'am, what happens next? Will we see combat again?" She paused, scanning the horizon, every ridge, every potential threat. "Yes, danger never ends, but you'll be ready because you'll have learned. You'll move with focus, not panic. You'll trust your instincts and you'll act decisively. Survival isn't luck, it's preparation, courage, and the willingness to act when others hesitate." She let the words hang, letting their weight settle in the young soldier's mind. Suddenly the comms crackled. An urgent report from a nearby sector, hostile movement, possible ambush, a convoy under threat. The soldiers nearby tensed. She didn't flinch. She inhaled slowly, mind cataloging every possible variable. "Prepare the team, load equipment, vehicles ready, stay alert. Move out," she instructed, voice calm, commanding. The officers nearby exchanged glances, some surprised, some in awe. She didn't hesitate. Danger once again demanded action. The young rookie, now slightly steadier from the previous missions, whispered, "Lieutenant, you're going out there again." She looked at him, eyes steady, voice unwavering. "Yes, because someone has to, and we will survive. That's what matters. Every mission, every engagement, every step we act. Not fear, not hesitation. Action." Helicopters prepared to lift, dust swirling in spirals around the base. Vehicles rumbled into formation. Soldiers moved with a rhythm she set, coordinating silently, instinctively, efficiently. The valley awaited them. Danger waited. The enemy did not rest, and neither would she. 5 Purple Hearts pressed against her chest, a quiet beacon, a warning, and a testament to everything she had endured. As the convoy departed the base, dust rising behind them like smoke from a battlefield long ended but never forgotten, she glanced over her shoulder. The base remained, quiet, safe for now. Her team moved under her guidance, alive because she had survived, because she had led, because she had acted decisively when others froze. And in that moment, as the sun dipped behind jagged mountains, she allowed herself the faintest hint of reflection. She had survived 5 life-threatening encounters. She had led through fire, bullets, and chaos. She had commanded respect without demanding it, inspired courage without speaking loudly, and ensured survival where others would have faltered. But even as the dust settled and helicopters rose into the sky, she knew one thing with absolute certainty: survival was not over. The battlefield was never done. Danger was always present, and when it came, she would be ready, always ready. Her 5 Purple Hearts pressed silently against her chest. Each one told a story. Each one marked a moment she had stared into death and chosen action. And as the convoy moved forward into the unknown, every soldier beside her understood something instinctively, without her saying a word. The woman they had underestimated, the lieutenant who seemed like fresh training, was a force they could follow and survive with, but never truly predict. The sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the valley. Somewhere the enemy watched. Somewhere danger waited, but she did not fear it. She had survived 5 battles. She had led through chaos, and she would do it again. The battlefield awaited, and Lieutenant Green, bearer of 5 Purple Hearts, would meet it, unflinching, unbroken, unstoppable.